Hello and welcome to Africa Live, where we bring you African and global news from all perspectives. I'm Famida Miller. Now it's 8 p.m. here in Nairobi, Kenya, noon in Washington, D.C. and 1 a.m. in Beijing. Now also coming up in the next hour. Breaking new ground, the world's newest cycling event, the Tour de Congo. And taking on the world, how Nigerian musicians are taking to the global stage. We begin in Sudan, where President Omar al-Bashir on Friday reiterated his threat to stop oil flows across its border with South Sudan. That's unless the South stops supporting rebels operating across the shared frontier. Khartoum said 2 weeks ago it would close 2 pipelines carrying oil exports from landlocked South Sudan to Port Sudan within 60 days, unless Juba cuts ties with Sudanese rebels. The South has denied it's supporting rebels and in turn has accused Sudan of backing insurgents on its soil. The two neighbors agreed in March to restart oil flows and end hostilities plaguing them since South Sudan became an independent state in 2011. Now, oil used to be the main source of income for Sudan until South Sudan's secession in July 2011, when Khartoum lost 75% of its oil production and its status as an oil exporter overnight. Both countries have continuously accused each other of backing rebels on the other's territory, one of several conflicts stemming from the split of what was once Africa's largest country. Now, here's Jane Keogh with more details.
Sudan and South Sudan are prepared to take steps brokered by the African Union to try to avert an oil crisis between them amid accusations from both sides that the other is supporting insurgencies in their territories. Sudan officially informed South Sudan on Tuesday that it would stop allowing its neighbor to export crude through its territory within 2 months unless Juba gave up support for insurgents operating across their shared border. In turn, Juba accused Khartoum of backing rebels on its territory, one of several conflicts stemming from the messy split in 2011 of what was once Africa's largest country. The dispute over rebel support has been rumbling for months, but the latest threat effectively tears up an agreement brokered by the African Union in March over transit fees that had shut the pipelines for 16 months. The latest oil stoppage threats would cut off the crude and transit fees that make up both countries' main source of foreign income. The row between the two countries has threatened to hit supplies to Asian buyers such as China National Petroleum Corp, India's ONCG Videsh, and Malaysia's Petronas, which run the oil fields in both countries. Many doubt Sudan will actually close the 2 cross-border export pipelines because its economy has been suffering without South Sudan's pipeline fees. A shutdown of oil production by Juba in January 2012 threw both countries into a deep economic crisis that both countries would not want a repeat of. The African Union suggested a continuation of a demilitarized zone between the two countries and setting up a mechanism to examine accusations of support for the insurgencies by both parties. Both sides have accused the other of violating the agreement. Each side is due to present their information to the African Union's committee from June the 20th to June the 25th. The committee will present its results on July the 25th. Jane Keogh, CCTV.
Now, for more details on the South Sudan oil dispute, we're now joined live in studio by Mr. Ali Khan Sachu. Mr. Sachu is the CEO of Rich Management in Nairobi and is a seasoned financial trade and regional affairs analyst. Welcome to Africa Live.
Thank you,
now,
Famida.
Mr. Sachu, looking at this ongoing dispute between the two countries, can Sudan and South Sudan at this point really afford to have this oil flow stopped, looking at how badly the economy was impacted last year, especially with regard to Juba?
We're talking about a daily revenue stream of about $50 million. Obviously, South Sudan gets the majority share of it. And I, like yourself, thought that, after the previous oil cutoff, when you saw inflation spike close to 50% in both countries, you had a small spike in unrest around Khartoum. I thought these were both like boxers who'd gone 15 rounds and realized the other one or the other could land a lucky punch and the lights would be out, and I thought they'd sort of reached a kind of agreement. But clearly, looking at the recent news, I think President Bashir feels very strongly that South Sudan are not coming through on some of the agreements they had. He sent his intelligence chief a few weeks ago to deliver a letter. And there is an impression that sometimes President Salva Kiir does not know what some of the people around him might be doing. So I think in this instance, Bashir has a case, but neither country can afford it, not for very long. And I think, where the tipping point is an experiment neither president should be taking.
And when we're looking at economies that aren't terribly big, that aren't large scale, how would Sudan specifically try to diversify to possibly get away from the impact of this reduced oil flow? Is that an option?
So for Sudan, obviously, it's the big hit, right? They've lost it. They're getting a transit fee now. Previously, they were getting a share of it. They've tried to diversify quite a lot of late, particularly in agriculture. Of course, the Nile runs through Sudan. And they've also looked at things like gold. But that adjustment process, it's not going to happen overnight. They can't replace that revenue straight away. So that tells you how strongly President Omar al-Bashir feels about this current situation.
Now, beyond the two countries involved, what does this mean for the market? What does it mean for importers or people who buy that oil from Sudan?
Interesting question. So the big buyers of Sudanese oil are in fact China, Malaysia and India. And a lot of people who look at geopolitical analysis feel that, on one side you have the US on the side of South Sudan, on the other side you have China on the side of Khartoum. And in a way, this is a kind of proxy war. And the Americans would be quite happy for the oil to be turned off to China, because this Sudanese oil represents 5% of their imports globally. So in a way, we're watching a proxy war where both sides at times might not be serving their own interests, but serving interests of other masters, in my opinion.
Now, between the two countries, you have this continuing relationship of mistrust. What are the options in terms of trying to resolve this dispute, going beyond accusations about rebels and looking at continuous oil flow and a relationship that benefits both parties?
Well, I think it requires probably the supporters of both sides to bring them to the table. In particular China and the US, and saying, this is serving, no one is winning out of this. But for the moment, I think that's not the case. I think, the US quite likes the idea of being able to switch off the oil into China at will. And so far, the Southern Sudanese seem to me to be ready to sort of push the envelope at the boundary region and cause Bashir all kinds of trouble.
All right, Mr. Ali Khan, thank you so much for your time today. We'll have to leave it there.
Thank you, Famida.
We're speaking there to Mr. Ali Khan Sachu. He is the CEO of Rich Management in Nairobi and also a trade and regional affairs analyst. Well, it's time now for a quick break when Africa Live returns. Recovery headache. Arab countries face the challenge of recovering assets stashed abroad by former leaders. And breaking new ground, the world's newest cycling event, the Tour de Congo.
This week on Talk Africa.
Nelson Mandela is the face of Africa.
There's a part of Nelson Mandela that is loved by the entire world.
Truly just makes you want to be better.
We at CCTV Africa are choosing to stand with Mandela.
I have fought very firmly.
Knowing him as I do is a good fighter.
And this Saturday, we will be dedicating the program to your thoughts and wishes for Africa's Madiba.
Best wishes for Tata Mandela.
Get well, Madiba, get well, Madiba.
You can send in your video messages to our email, cctvafricanm@gmail.com. Post your comments on our Facebook page or send your message via Twitter using the hashtag #TalkAfrica and stand with Mandela.
Welcome back. The South African presidency has confirmed that ailing statesman Nelson Mandela's military ambulance broke down as he was being rushed to a Pretoria hospital from his Johannesburg home 2 weeks ago. The presidency's spokespersons made reassurances that every care was taken to ensure that Madiba's medical condition was not compromised by the unforeseen incident. A second ambulance was used after the initial transportation broke down due to engine failure. Meanwhile, the people of Madiba's home village in Qunu in the Eastern Cape say they're sad that his repeated hospitalization in the past few months has taken him away from his home, the same way his life as a freedom fighter had torn him away from them decades ago. Now here's CCTV's Renee Delcom with the details.
The remote village of Qunu in South Africa's Eastern Cape province was one of the first places Nelson Mandela visited in the months after his historic release from prison in February 1990. He grew up herding cattle and playing in these fields as a boy, and said it had been important for him to return here to see the site where his mother had been buried. In his autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, he said although many things in Qunu had changed during his 27 years in prison, he had found that the warmth and simplicity of the people of Qunu had endured. Qunu farmer and community leader Welcome Nkakana says he had always been impressed with Nelson Mandela's ability to connect with people at all levels.
When Tata Mandela came to the people of Qunu, most of the good qualities he had was that of humility, that of connectivity to the people. The people of Qunu were very happy about Tata Mandela having become the President of the Republic of South Africa. They were so excited because their place now was being uplifted. And now, for instance, the name of Qunu is known right around the globe, not only in South Africa, but the whole world.
In 1999, after serving a single term as President of South Africa, Madiba returned here to live in the place where he said he had spent some of the happiest moments of his life.
Tata Mandela had made a very important decision, that of saying to the whole of South Africa and the world that I am now going back home and I want to stay home with my people. And all of a sudden, unfortunately, he became sick and he had to move to Johannesburg, where there are specialist doctors who can look after his health.
People here in Qunu say they've been deeply saddened that Nelson Mandela's ill health took him away from them to the cities up north in Johannesburg and Pretoria. They say it feels as though he's once again been separated from his rural people. Madiba was airlifted from his Qunu home in December last year to a hospital in Pretoria. Nokuzola Tetani of the Nelson Mandela Museum in Qunu says the village has since been struggling to come to terms with his absence.
It was nice to have Madiba around. You remember that Nelson Mandela, he has been staying here in Qunu. It was nice to see the flag up because we knew for a fact that Madiba is around. It was nice to see the helicopter landing, every now and then, coming with Madiba because we knew for a fact that Madiba was around. Even we knew that, we were sharing, the very air that we breathe, with Nelson Mandela. Now that that is no longer here, he's lying there in a hospital bed, we feel, very sad about it.
If I were asked by the people really to pray for Tata Mandela, I would say, please God, do help us to give him more time, because we still need his wisdom and guidance, and want him to still stay with us a little longer.
Renee Delcom, CCTV, Qunu.
A former World Bank executive has launched a new political party in South Africa. Mampela Rampela aims to rival the African National Congress, which has dominated the political scene since coming to power at the end of apartheid in 1994. Dr. Rampela had harsh words for the ruling party on Saturday. CCTV's Guy Henderson reports from Pretoria.
The crowds came. maybe 1,000 people wearing the colours of the country's newest political party. The atmosphere almost festive, but the message from Arang's founder, a scathing attack on the ruling party.
20 years is too long to wait for jobs. 20 years is too long to wait for quality education. 20 years is too long to wait for healthcare. We must act now. The time has come to restore the promise of a free South Africa, to offer hope and the prospect of a dignified life for us.
A former World Bank executive, the one-time partner of murdered anti-apartheid leader Steve Biko. Many people know the name Ramphele Mampela, but with elections less than a year away, she still has a mountain to climb. Loyalties to the ANC run deep. This is the party that fought and won the long battle for liberation after centuries of racial oppression. At the last election in 2009, the party still won over 60% of the vote. That number's not impenetrable. The main opposition party here, the Democratic Alliance, managed a 17% share that year. But the gains aren't easy either. The last serious attempt to form a party by a group of former ANC heavyweights fell flat. That's not deterred this man either, though. Expelled ANC Youth League leader Julius Malema now says he too wants to take on his former masters. The coming money laundering trial could yet put paid to that. The ANC has written off its rivals, though, and even analysts say it may be a little early for a serious contest.
If I was the electoral strategist of the ANC, I'd be concerned. I would be concerned because losing between 8 and 12% of the vote in every single province except KwaZulu-Natal is something to be worried about. That doesn't mean the ANC is going to lose the election. It does mean, however, that it has to be careful because it should not be taking the citizens for granted.
A bold first step on a long road. Dr. Ramphele really laid into the ANC here on Saturday, branding it corrupt and arrogant. But her challenge now is going to be getting that message out nationwide to try and build a genuine platform to take the party on and to bring in voters that may increasingly be looking for alternatives but haven't necessarily found them. Guy Henderson, CCTV, Pretoria.
The South African government says it will repatriate to Libya assets reportedly stashed by former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. President Jacob Zuma says this will be done according to UN protocol. Representatives from the Libyan government met with South African Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan recently to request the recovery of the assets. This raises questions over just how much the former Libyan leader had stashed abroad in terms of assets and measures the current government is taking to reclaim these. From Cairo in neighboring Egypt, CCTV's Yasser Hakim reports.
He was always a source of controversy when he was alive, and the controversy continues after his death. Speculation is mounting over Gaddafi's investments in many countries. Some go as far as describing him as the richest man in the world.
It is a known fact that he had dealings in Italy among several European countries, but even more throughout Africa. He called himself the king of all kings of Africa, which reflects the influence he had in the continent through his money and assets. Our research shows at least $50 billion around the world, but nothing is accurate yet.
The Libyan government moved to repatriate those billions by establishing a single body in 2012, which cooperates with a UN committee formed in terms of the UN Security Council Resolution number 1970 and a panel of experts. As hard as it may be, the mission to repatriate the money has succeeded so far in 2 African countries, Egypt and South Africa. In South Africa, it is believed he had $1 billion in gold, cash and diamonds. In Egypt, his investments are triple that amount. Gaddafi's cousin, Gaddafi's Dem, was his business front in Egypt. Libya threatened to sack millions of Egyptian workers in Libya if he was not handed over. Authorities arrested Dem and is now on trial in Egypt for corruption and attempted murder.
The Gaddafi investments are now owned by the Libyan government, and Egypt was rewarded with a $2 billion soft loan and a facilitated gas deal and promises of more investment soon. In South Africa, an agreement has been forged to repatriate the money and assets through a joint committee to assess the funds.
Assessing the funds and assets is the sticking point when it comes to recovering what Gaddafi smuggled abroad. Most countries also request court orders and complicated legal steps to initiate procedures. Whether or not the attempts are successful, one thing is for sure: Gaddafi will remain in the spotlight for years to come. Yasser Hakim for CCTV, Cairo.